I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Alan Cornish, and I'm representing the Newfoundland and Labrador Table Tennis Association. And we're going to show you a table tennis demonstration film to show you all the basic strokes of table tennis so that you might practice these strokes for yourself on your own tables. My qualifications for this is that I'm the Atlantic Province's #1 man's player, and we've assembled some of the best players in Newfoundland and some of the finest stroke players that you'll find in the Atlantic Provinces to make this film. My opponent at the other end of the table is Nancy Janes, the Newfoundland Open Ladies Champion. And we're just warming up our strokes, limbering up, ready to do something a little bit harder later on. Nancy's playing a forehand counter-attack, and I'm playing a backhand counter-attack. You'll see that I'm a left-hander. Every stroke you see me playing this evening will be performed in exactly the same way were I a right-hander with the other hand. It may surprise many Canadians to know that table tennis is the second most popular sport in the world, and it's been played now for well over 50 years, very seriously, in different parts of the world. Over these 50 years, various grips have been tried, various ways of holding the racket, and it, over that period of time, has evolved two particular grips which have dominated world events more than any other. The most popular grip in the last 50 years, which has won the most world championships, is what's called the shake hands grip, where you shake hands with your racket. And I'd like to show Valerie Haynes, who has a perfect shake hands grip, showing you how she holds it, both from one side of the racket with one finger on the blade, and the other side with the thumb slightly on the blade. And you get the feel of the racket with this grip by just shaking hands. In the eastern part of the world, the grip that's the most popular, and it's been a controversial point over the years whether it's a more effective grip than the shake hands grip, is what's called the pen holder grip, where you hold the racket as if you were holding a pen and writing. And Su Pan Chu uses that grip himself, and he'll demonstrate the way he holds with the forehand and the backhand. Pan Chu on certain backhand strokes will move his three fingers, which are behind the blade of the racket, to different positions for maximum comfort. Now there are various variants on the shake hands grip. I myself use a grip which has one finger on the blade and the second finger almost on the blade. I'm what you might call a 1.5 fingered shake hands grip player. And many players have this grip. Whereas we have two particularly fine exponents of another variant of the shake hands grip in Newfoundland. We have Sandra White and Vicky Mercer that actually hold two fingers on the blade with the shake hands grip. There's only ever been one world champion with this grip, but there have been many fine players over the years that have had two fingers on the blade. Yet another grip, which is not particularly recommended because of the difficulty in ball control, is what's called the hammer grip, where you hold the racket as if it were a hammer, and you have no fingers whatsoever on the blade of the racket. There have been one or two world-class players with that grip, but on the whole, people have found they've lacked control holding it as if they were holding a tennis racket. In all the strokes we're going to show you on this film, you'll notice there's one prevailing feature of every single stroke, and that's that the players will turn their shoulders before they perform the strokes. If they were to play a backhand stroke, here's a right-handed backhand, they'll turn and point their right shoulder across to the other side of the net. If they're going to perform any forehand stroke, here's a right-hander's forehand, they'll point their left shoulder towards the net. And they do this on every stroke they play to gain maximum control. A left-hander will similarly, when playing a backhand stroke, point his left shoulder to the net, and when he's playing a forehand stroke, he'll point his right shoulder to the net. The stroke that's revolutionized table tennis in the last 10 years was a stroke invented by an Englishman when the new sponge materials were introduced some years ago. This stroke is a very heavily topspun attacking stroke played with the forehand. This stroke is like the conventional forehand attacking stroke with the racket angle forward, but the shot is played from well below the ball to way above the ball in a very fast movement, hitting the ball along its tangent to its path, usually played against the ball after it's dropped from its maximum height after the bounce. This stroke is something which every attacking table tennis player has to acquire in modern table tennis. Here's a demonstration of the forehand topspin. You'll see how the player who plays the topspin has to bend his knees very much in performing the stroke. He plays with the racket angle forward, hitting a ball that's dropping after its maximum height of the bounce. The ball is played so it clears the net by a wide margin and then dips down violently with the effect of the topspin off the table at the other side. Throughout the stroke, the attacking player should maintain the bent position of the knees and avoid standing upright as he plays it. Otherwise, the effect of the topspin is lost. The plane of the racket is kept at a constant angle throughout Pun's stroke action, always with the racket angle forwards. And this is Valerie Haynes using the same topspin stroke which is the finest topspin of any lady in Newfoundland. We'll see how Valerie, a right-hander, is pointing her left shoulder across the net. Her racket's angled forwards throughout the whole motion, and the racket's beginning well below the ball at the beginning of the stroke. The most basic weapon in every attacking player's armory is the forehand topspin stroke. This stroke is played with the racket angled forwards and a right angle being made between the racket arm and a line through the two shoulders. One must play this stroke with the knees bent and the body angled forwards and the racket angled forwards. The stroke is played by gently lifting the ball from just below it to just above it in a movement of the forearm pivoting from the elbow, which gives the impression of giving a salute signal. With the racket ended up somewhere near the head on the same side of the body, it's a gentle stroke. This stroke should be performed very gently and slowly in practice to gain maximum control of the ball. The player should not attempt to be too aggressive with this stroke too early in its development, but always aim at playing longer and longer rallies. See how there's a right angle between the playing arm and a line through the shoulders. My right shoulder's pointing across the net. As always, there's a knees bent position. The racket angle is angled forwards and kept at a constant angle throughout this salute shot. The biggest problem for beginners usually is they don't begin the stroke below the ball sufficiently to lift it over the net. This stroke can easily be modified with a very fast flick of the wrist to make the forehand slam. Here's Sandra White, one of our foremost juniors, playing the forehand attacking stroke. See how her racket begins underneath the ball and ends up above it. Throughout the stroke, her left shoulder is pointed across the net towards the opponent. The racket's angled forward at a constant angle throughout the stroke. Many of the rallies between modern attacking table tennis players boil down to a battle of both trying to attack at the same time. And when they do that, it's called counter-attacking or counter-hitting. They're both trying to slam the ball at each other at the same time. This is a stroke that requires less of an arm movement. The racket's still angled forward and the body pivoted forward in the most economical position possible. Here's Nancy Janes and myself playing the forehand counter-attack. See how we're leaning forwards on this stroke, angling our rackets forwards and doing quite a small stroke, a miniature version of the forehand attacking stroke, taking the ball quite early off the bounce so that it goes back very fast without very much effort on the part of the attacker. The beginner when learning this stroke usually makes the mistake of trying to slam too hard and never keeping a sufficiently long rally going to get the feel of the stroke. Also, the beginner tends to wave his arms about too much and not keep his elbows into his side. It's very important to maintain an economical stance in this stroke because you may suddenly have to switch from forehand to backhand and back again. This is Laurie Clouston, the best under 13-year-old in Newfoundland, playing the same stroke. Laurie Clouston's already won 3 titles this season, mainly because of his ability to play a very consistent forehand counter-attack. See how Laurie's angled forwards with his left shoulder pointing across the net, racket angle forwards, doing quite a small stroke so that he has time to recover himself for the next ball. The backhand counter-attack is played in a similar fashion to the forehand counter-attack with a pivot from the elbow of the forearm, with the racket again angled forward and with a slight turn of the racket shoulder across to the other side of the net. Here again, the beginner shouldn't try to play this stroke too fast, but aim at consistency. Aiming his shot diagonally across the table, aiming at a certain point on the diagonal in his mind when he plays it. You'll see that the motion's quite a small stroke, taken quite early, and should be played without gripping the racket too tight. Here's a picture of Valerie Haynes, who has the best backhand counter-attack in Newfoundland, playing this backhand stroke. See how there's a slight turn of the right shoulder across the net. The racket's angled forward throughout the stroke, and the stroke's quite a small one, with a very economical movement of the body, in order to be ready for a sudden switch of direction of a ball to her forehand. The most important weapon in every defensive player's armoury is the backhand chop. This is an extension of the backhand push stroke played further away from the table in a much more bent position. The backhand push, when a long way from the table and with a slightly more vertical action, becomes a backhand chop. Again, it's most definitely a pivot from the elbow of the forearm, and most important, keeping the angle of the racket blade constant throughout the entire stroke. While the stroke's being played, it's important not to begin to stand up as you play it, because control is then lost. You'll see that with this stroke, as with all other strokes, it's played with very much a knees bent position, and as with all backhand strokes, it's played with the racket shoulder pointing across the net. You should attempt to play the stroke to a ball that's moving outside of your body, and avoid standing in front of the ball as it comes towards you. In this way, your racket will tend to follow the ball when you extend your arm and play the stroke. When a defensive player plays against an opponent who's putting a lot of topspin on the ball, he has to bend down much lower to play the stroke, and it's quite possible his racket will hit the floor at some point during its motion. The defender playing against a heavily topspun ball also will need to move his wrist, keeping the plane of the racket moving through the ball to a certain extent to counteract the topspin. This puts additional chop or backspin on the ball. The most difficult problem for the defender to overcome when playing this and the forehand version of the same stroke is to be able to move to and fro to the right position to play the stroke. The defender should avoid at all costs playing a ball above the height of the table, and should try to let the ball bounce below the height of the table when playing this and the forehand stroke. And here's John Waugh playing the backhand chop. See how John Waugh's right shoulder is turned to face across the net. How it's a pivot from the elbow of the forearm, and how the racket angle is angled backwards, and how the racket angle is kept at a constant angle throughout the entire stroke. The defending player should avoid trying to rush the movement of the ball and try to send it back as slowly with as much control as possible with each stroke. In practice, you should aim this shot diagonally across the table or straight into the opponent's forehand attack to get used to playing against the most difficult strokes. Notice how Eamon bends down as he plays the stroke and lets the ball drop a long way before he chops the ball. You can see the pivot quite clearly of the forearm from the elbow, the racket angle backwards at a constant angle throughout the stroke. His right shoulder is pointing across to the other side of the net as he plays the stroke. The forehand chop is played in a similar fashion to the backhand chop. Again, it's a pivot from the elbow of the forearm with the racket angled backwards in a nice smooth motion, starting with the racket somewhere near the head level and moving forwards and downwards in a gentle arc. This is played with the knees bent. And as with the backhand chop, you should try to play this stroke below the height of the net, below the height of the table, which means that you have to bend the knees considerably in the playing of this stroke. Here again, the problem for the defender is to move into position to play balls that might drop short of him or be pitched up very high at him. At all times the defender must endeavour to play the ball at the same height below the table, moving forwards or backwards as necessary, so that a constant stroke is produced. Defender shouldn't try to feel as if he's hurried at any stage in playing this stroke, and if he has to move quickly to the ball, he should try to anticipate as early as possible where it's going, so there's no hurried motion of the body. You'll notice that throughout this demonstration, I've made no reference to footwork, concentrating only on the movement of the shoulders. If the student follows these directions of movements of the shoulder, he will find that his feet will quickly follow the same pattern as his shoulders in playing the strokes. Defensive table tennis demands tremendous stamina with the modern attacking materials, and the defensive player has to be something of an athlete to hold his own in top-class competition. Forehand chop. You'll notice here that John Waugh is angling his left shoulder across the net, playing a movement of the forearm pivoted from the elbow. We'll see how John is playing with his knees bent so that he can play the ball below the height of the table and gain maximum control over the attacker's topspins. Here's John playing against heavy topspin attack, well back from the table. Good defensive strokes take some while to acquire, and the defender always must be trying to do the perfect stroke with perfect control, even though the player he's practicing against may be sending over balls with varying spins and varying speeds. Always he must be trying to smooth out the spin, smooth out the speeds, and neither putting too much nor too little backspin on the ball. He should always aim just to put enough backspin or chop on the ball to counteract the opponent's attacking strokes.
Tails, Mr. Cornish's choice. It's a match between Alan Cornish again, Atlantic singles champion, and Bruce Burton, who's president of the Newfoundland Table Tennis Association and is also one of the finest players in Newfoundland. The score is love all. Love one. 1-all. Two, 1. 2-all. Change of service, 2-3. 3-all. 3-4. 3-5. 4-5. 'Change of serve, 5-all. 6-5. Six all. Six, 7. Seven all. Change of serves, 7-8. Seven, 9. Eight, 9. Nine all. 10-9. Change of serve, 9-11. Nine, 12. Ten, 12. Ten, 13. Ten, 14. Change of serve, 15-10. Sixteen, 10. Eighteen, 10. 19-10. Change of serve, 10-20. Gain to Mr. Cornish, 21-10.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you.
Congratulations, Ellen. Nice game, Bruce.